Hey everybody, David Brickley, owner and CEO of social first marketing agency STN Digital. Recently, I was asked by #Sports to come out to Vegas and do a talk on the 6 ways to retain your superstar employees. I was joined by my amazing friend and colleague, Tatiana Holifield, formerly of NBC, BET, the Pacers, Hulu. Now she's over at Sirius XM Pandora. And we both give you tips as leaders of how to retain those superstar employees, both by tools and also some different ways we found to get more elasticity within your organization. So I guarantee you value. I guarantee you'll walk away with something that you can implement for free today. And also let us know in the comments what you think and what was helpful as you walk through this presentation coming up. So we'll take you back to Vegas at #Sports and take it away.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it, guys.
Okay, don't let me fall on this stage, y'all. I just went straight through the crowd.
First of all, thanks so much for joining us today. I know everybody's busy and trying to navigate emails and things like that, so I appreciate it. We definitely want to provide a ton of value for you today. So there'll be a QR code at the very end where you can download this full presentation, so don't feel like you have to jot too many notes down. So this next part, we promise we're only going to spend like 30 seconds to slide on. Enough about us, and we'll get into the meat of this, but I'll go to Tatiana for a quick intro.
So hey everybody, I'm Tatiana Holifield. I've been in music, sports, and entertainment for the last 15 years, managing teams of everywhere from 3 to 30 people. David?
Awesome. Short and
Short
sweet.
and sweet.
All right, so my name is David Brickley, CEO of a social first marketing agency called STN Digital. We work with a ton of brands in the sports and entertainment space, and just to kind of add some credibility to the conversation, we've won quite a few awards in the culture and best employers in sports with front office sports as well. So trying to give you guys some insights of how we've done that and some things that have really worked with our team. So today we're going to give you the 6 ways to retain your superstar employees. For the agenda, we'll talk about for 20 minutes or so just on the content and then open it up for Q&A. We'd love to, again, provide as much value as possible. So story time. Elena, I know you're here today, so we hooked it up here. So, let's just say you have 4 people on your team, right? You're a director and you have 4 people on your team. We have Sally, Elena, Malcolm, and Tommy on the squad. And they're working 55 hours a week, let's say. For an example, you're in the middle of the season. This is not a 40-hour work week, but we understand we work in sports and entertainment. You're not gonna be working a normal 9 to 5. So it's a lot, but it's healthy. You guys are crushing goals and everything like that. And then Tommy comes through and says, hey, I got offered another job and need to put in by 2 weeks. We see the obituary on Twitter with the threads that Tommy will then go forward with. And then he never tells you where he's going. Never tells you where he's going at the very end. Or it's the LeBron James South Beach, like I'm taking my talents to tweet. But anyways, Tommy's leaving us. So what happens, right? We have this opening, and you could probably speak for anybody working in sports too, how long this HR process takes to fill that role.
Oh my God. I don't know about you all, but it is the longest process ever. And so 3 months sometimes is a great thing if it can make it happen, if they can make it happen. But yeah, absolutely. It's always a forever process.
So basically in this story time, Sally, Elena, and Malcolm have to pick up the slack, right? Because it was a 4-person team. And this happens too if someone takes a 2-week vacation. This happens too if someone has COVID, God forbid, things like that. It just starts to really weigh on the team. So thank God after the 3-month process, we get Liz back on the team. We finally think to ourselves, finally we have the proper team.
Oh, and don't forget, we need to train Liz.
Right.
So that time for training in between is this dead time.
So unfortunately in those 3 months, or maybe 4 or 5, when you actually train Liz to get up to speed, here comes Malcolm. Now he's been so burnt out. I wasn't looking, but someone hit me up on LinkedIn, and I just took the call, and it always kind of just happens, right? So.
And if you have really bad luck, sometimes that happens at the same time. Liz and Malcolm, 2 days within each other, they both decide to quit.
So Tati and I have talked about this a lot. So we call this a vicious cycle, right? You just can't get out of this vicious cycle where. This can also mean if you guys have, maybe it's an all-star campaign or a big initiative, or your boss says, let's launch a TikTok or a Discord or a metaverse or whatever it may be, you're just getting by, right, with the normal things you have to do to cover this sport, and stuff like that starts to happen. So unfortunately, I've stolen a lot of your teammates at STN. So I had 21 of my employees that came from pro sports. I asked them why they left. This is obviously anecdotal and just a small subset. But you see there, right? Burnout, lack of leadership, hit a ceiling, or was laid off due to budget. So all that being said, what's the solution?
What's the solution, David?
You need tools to be a better leader, and you need to find elasticity within your organization. So we're really going to talk about those two buckets today, is what tools can I use as a leader to avoid burnout, to help my team as much as I possibly can. And I could sit up here all day long as a CEO and say, just hire more people or just open up more budget. And I want Tatiana to speak from the fact, well, that is obviously not always the case.
Exactly.
So,
I'm on the corporate side. So I'm currently at Sirius XM in Pandora. I'm managing 2 brands. And of course, I don't have that same type of flexibility that David has being the owner of an agency.
Awesome. So we'll get into it. So number one, this is going to seem a little weird for some of you, but one thing at STN that I started doing right when kind of the pandemic started was surveying your team weekly. So what's that look like? So every single Friday, it's a 5-minute survey where everybody on my team fills out on a scale of 1 to 5 how they rate their pulse for the week. So this is really important because we are now virtual, and you don't see the person hanging their head at the kitchen or the water cooler.
And most people have their cameras off.
Yeah, exactly. So you're really not able to see, like, hey, is everything okay? You seem kind of down this week. Is there anything I can help you as your leader? You're not getting that information. So 3 additional questions we ask is, how are you tracking on an emotional, physical, and mental level, 1 to 10? Again, I think this may seem kind of odd, like, are people actually going to answer this? Would I feel comfortable answering these things? I will tell you, the first couple of weeks, maybe people lie and say 10s because they think they're going to get like written up or something if they're actually honest. But it really, what I found is this written systematic form allows your team to be super honest with you. And here's what's so huge about this. You can dig in. Malcolm was burnt out for 3 months, right? And he was probably a 4 out of 10 mentally every single week for at least 7, 8, 9 weeks. So when that LinkedIn message came in, he's like, whatever, I'm gonna listen. You can dive in as a manager, as a leader. If you see Malcolm's at a 4, you see this, Teresa, this is my VP. She was at a 5. So I definitely checked in with her like, hey, is everything okay? And either you can help or not. But this is so huge to try to get in. And when someone puts their 2 weeks in, there's been definitely 3 or 4 months of thought, as we all know, if you guys ever put your 2 weeks in. So as a leader, if you can get ahead of that, that's huge.
And also, another thing I'll add is if you don't have a system like this, Slack check-ins. So one of the things I implemented with my team is an emoji system. And you put an emoji on your Slack about how you're feeling. We have a coding system. So if you're in a great mood, maybe you have like a hands up emoji. If you are in a blasé mood or a somber mood, maybe, you just don't feel it that day. So you're in a sad face mood or whatever the case is. It's a good way to check the temperature. And then that also allows not only the leaders to check in with their team to see if there's something emotionally going on, maybe behind the scenes that they can help support on, or other team members to be a little extra patient and kind and show some grace.
Yeah, grace is a great word because, I've had people rank themselves a 1 out of 10, and I have no idea why. I dig in and say, my grandfather passed away earlier this week. Like, wow, I'm so glad I have this information now so I can let your team know, like, hey, so-and-so's going through it, give them some grace. I mean, we're humans, right? So you go through those things.
Yeah, actually, back when I was at the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever, I had an employee who was female, and I had no idea why her behavior had changed. And I ended up finding out later she was going through postpartum depression after having her second child. It's not something she wanted to disclose to me as her boss, nor does she have to. But I definitely noticed the change in her behavior, and I'm thinking, why is this happening? And you get so easy. You can easily get caught up in your day-to-day and think, oh, such and such is just a bad employee or they're in a mood, when there may be outside factors. We don't know if someone is maybe taking care of a parent who's dealing with cancer or anything like that. So you always want to do those check-ins on the human level.
Yeah, so a free way you can do this is Google Survey, just send it out once a week. And again, I think all of us feel like we're these amazing managers and we're approachable, and like, Sally will let me know if she's going through it. Like, humans just don't feel comfortable saying, hey, I feel like garbage today. Can I get some grace or can I have the day off? Like, that's just really rare for someone to actually have that self-awareness to admit that. This allows kind of that written form to allow that to kind of come to the forefront. The second thing is monitoring your team's hours. So as a Laker fan, I never forgive Mike D'Antoni for this situation, but Funny story, Kobe was actually our first client at STN back 9 or so years ago. But as you can see by the basketball reference in your top left-hand corner, Mike D'Antoni ran him into the ground, 47 minutes, 48 minutes, etc. You can see that game, his body was breaking down. He fell down 3 or 4 different times, and then he snapped his Achilles, right? So one thing we were talking about, Tatiana and I, as we were discussing this, is how do you rest your star players? And just like a coach does, they monitor minutes, right? They pull them out of the fourth quarter if it's a blowout. If it's an older player or a veteran, they try to get the ice on their knees as soon as possible if the game's within reach or without a reach, excuse me. So this is super important. So from a time tracking standpoint, at my company, everybody puts in their time, so you can kind of track and see. I get alerted if anybody works over like that 55 hours, and we have like a time back police, which makes people have like half days or a time back day if you worked over 7 days, which I know a lot of you would probably love. But also, and I want to speak on this real quick with Tatiana, is on a daily basis. This seems really granular, but I think what Tatiana and I both find is people make assumptions that something's really important and they spend a ton of time on it. Therefore, they burn themselves out. But as a manager, like, wait, what are you working on? No. That's like next quarter. Like, why are you working on that? Yeah. So being able to drill down via your employee's calendar or their day-to-day entries like this can really show what they're working on.
Yeah. David, let's go to the next slide about the calendar. So one of the things I always tell my employees to do, especially when your calendar looks like this on a daily basis, is pull all the way back. If you have to look at the month or the week as a whole, put it in a pie chart. How much of your day and your time or your week or your month is spent in meetings, is spent taking a lunch, is spent maybe in cross-functional meetings, or maybe creative brainstorms, or whatever those buckets are, and you'll really start to see some patterns. And from there, you'll be able to determine where is the time suck that you then can start to pull back and allow your team to have more of an opportunity to not be burnt out.
Yeah, and in my team, we really believe in if it's not on your calendar, it's not going to get done. So if lunch is an important thing for you, it better be in your calendar. If as you see there on a Friday, the big red block is focus time. You need focus time to be able to think of that big campaign. You may need focus time to check in with your team. That should be a 2-hour block on your calendar each and every week. If it's not on your calendar, it won't get done. And then you kind of already spoke to the Slack emoji. And when you're trying to get in the flow state and you're trying to focus, like letting your team know, like, please don't bother me. I need to crank this out real quick.
Huge Slack user. And I tell my team all the time, if you need time to focus, if you need creative time, turn your Slack message on, and I tell other members of the team, schedule that message. If you see that some person has their Slack notification turn to focus on, schedule it to an hour later or 2 hours later. In our situation, it's sports, it's media and entertainment. We're not curing cancer. It can wait.
Yeah.
Allow that person the opportunity to focus.
And going back to the system where you kind of check in with your team, if somebody's overwhelmed, the first thing I do as a leader is I say, let's pull up your calendar. Share your screen, pull up your calendar, and let's find out what I can start hacking away. And again, let's say you're 2 months out from All-Star and you want them to start working on an All-Star campaign. Like, you know what? Let's pause All-Star thinking right now. Yeah. Let's focus on X, Y, and Z because we just had a big trade that happened. Like, you're going to have to constantly, as a leader, tell your team what they can hack and what they can continue because they don't feel the empowerment like, oh, I'll just put this to the side. They can't really self-regulate what's important and what's not sometimes.
Especially working in a big company, if you have a small team, for example, you can't always be everywhere, right? And so we try to have a buddy system. Oftentimes I notice maybe 4 people from the same team are in one meeting. Yeah. Pick a delegate. Have a buddy system. Someone can take notes. Someone can record the meeting. The other people can catch up later. Maximize your time and your opportunities to save time where you can. And as leaders, I find it very important to set the tone. So they follow me. Yeah. If I'm eating during lunch or eating my lunch break during a Zoom call, that's probably because I'm not setting my boundaries right either. And I want to ensure that my team is following suit.
Yeah, quick question?
Yeah, just the time tracking is like one of the most important things, the hardest things to implement within any company. What Do you have any advice on how to do that? And are there ones that you found to be somewhat powerful?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to feel like your big brother at first, and there's going to be a little bit of a culture shock. But I think if you can explain the why, is I want to be able to, as your manager, to kind of know what you're working on, so I can tell you, like, you don't need to spend that much time on those different things. We've used T-Sheets, Harvest, different systems like that. But it really is a leader if you can see what they're working on, and maybe they're working on something. I don't need you to spend 9 hours a week on All-Star campaign. I only need you to spend a couple minutes type thing. So.
Another thing, as David touched on just a minute ago, as leaders, sometimes more junior members of the team, if they hear something from you, they think it's an immediate pressing need. And they stop everything they're doing because it's coming from you. If David is just brainstorming about an idea, he's like, oh, I think we should research this new team or new app. All of a sudden, and he says that to a coordinator, they're like, oh my God, David said, the CEO of the company said we need to research this new app. So they stop their entire day, everything they're working on, and now they're researching for 4 hours, when it was probably just a brainstorming idea. I have to realize that myself. As a VP, if I come to someone asking, for something, it may not always be urgent or pressing. And so sometimes you will start to see patterns like that. Another thing just yesterday I did with my team is we had a content prioritization meeting where I literally just talked about what's everything that is currently on the team's table. I had this with my leads.
Right.
And from there, I found buckets. I found certain things that they were spending way too much time on, such as closed captioning on videos or uploading videos to YouTube. Things like that are truly a time suck, which we could cut back on, and we'll talk more about that in a minute.
So the third step is career pathing. So of those that resigned in 2021, according to Pew Research, 63% left their job due to a lack of opportunities for advancement. I'm willing to bet a big percentage of that are people that probably had a chance for advancement, but nobody ever came to them to tell them how that would work, or said, hey, where do you want to go? Let me, as your leader, help you get there, which is a big part. So Tatiana and I kind of thought of some questions that we ask our team on an annual basis. Again, we'll have a QR code to send this over to you all after the presentation. But one thing I ask all my teammates once a year is, 12 months from today, what would your ideal salary be? Which, again, this may seem like kind of an odd question to tell your boss, but I had an personal assistant a few years ago that made about $50,000 entry level. And she's like, I want to make $95,000 in a year. I'm like, okay, so we're going to have to kind of reset expectations here, because you'd have to be promoted 3 times in 12 months to get to that point. But that was great because I was able to set that expectation. I think she got like a $10,000 raise in that 12 months, and she was happy about it rather than saying, oh, I only got 10, not 35. So these like open questions with your leaders and your team are so important. But so another one is 12 months from today, what position in the company would you like to be in? Again, if they want to be somewhere that is impossible in that certain trajectory, you can change it. And then a personal goal, that's really important. I have teammates that tell me, I want to read 12 books this year, or I want to buy a dog this year. And as a leader, you can kind of help them. Like you said, you would buy those people books probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I do when, especially when I have new people coming onto the team, I ask about their hobbies. What are the things that they do outside of work? It will allow me to get a better gauge. Sometimes I found out, hey, this person wants to be a director or a writer or a producer, but maybe they're in a different role now. How can I set them up on the path to continue those extracurricular activities that they may be doing on a volunteer basis, but can lead them to their end goal?
And what you're noticing here is it's kind of these forced check-ins in a way to extract information from your team, because they're not naturally raising their hand, because they may think, I think people get really scared, right? If they work in social media, but they want to move to the video department, if I tell that to my manager, are they going to fire me or not treat me correctly? If you say that's an okay conversation for us to have and have that open transparency, it's going to really allow you to keep some of your superstars on the team.
And one last thing on that too, find out if there are other areas of interest within the company. Let's say maybe someone is in the programming department or the research department, but on a personal level, they really love social media. And so maybe there's an opportunity where we can start to do some stretch projects, we'll get into that in a second, to learn cross-functionally and relieve some bandwidth.
All right, so number 4 is more transparency and communication, which I think, again, in a virtual world is even more important. One of my favorite books I highly recommend everybody read is Leaders. You may have seen his content. Simon Sinek, Start With Why, how great leaders inspire everyone to take action. So trying to keep the sports analogies alive today. What's the difference from an engaged employee that feels impactful and a disengaged employee that feels like they're on that hamster wheel? And the answer is their impact and goals, right? I think a lot of times we leave our week or we leave our month or our quarter or our year like, I guess I did a good job. I feel like I did a good job. And my boss told me a few times I did a good job. But there's not those tangible things like a scoreboard, right? If you're on a team, of course, I'm a Laker fan, so I made them win in this scenario. But if you're on a team, like you can look at a scoreboard and know, hey, we're down by 10, let's band together. Or hey, I'm the 12th man on this roster, I gotta just rebound and play defense. Like you have a very clear mission for your role on the team, and you know if you're successful or not. So you can go in there, play 5 minutes, grab 5 rebounds, and know you did your job. And I think a lot of people just don't know their mission, their KPIs, or what goals. I'll tell you from an agency standpoint, a lot of my clients can't hand me a marketing manual of here's our follower goals, here's our brand awareness goal, here's how we want to go at the end of the year. And it's really difficult to know if you won or not if you don't have that scoreboard.
And speaking of the scoreboard analogy, just yesterday I had skip level meetings with the lowest tier on my team, so assistants, coordinators, specialists, producers, and just had a one-on-one with them just to find out, what do they love about their job? What do they hate about their job? What do they do in their off time? And just some general questions on a one-to-one basis to get to know them better. The one thing that came up a lot was about the value and the impact. When they look back at the end of their year, they want to be able to see physically the reward of the projects that they've put out. And if you think about your star players, your MVPs, what do they care about? Getting points on the board. Yeah. So we need to have a system in place where your team can get points on the board, where they can continue to feel valued by the work that they're putting out and be proud of that.
Yeah. Elena, you remember this. We worked at NBC Sports with On Her Turf, and we had this big goal of 100,000 followers on Instagram. I think December 27th, we were at 99,780. And we were like, what are we going to do? We'll stay up all night to hit this. And we were able to celebrate after that and send a bottle of champagne and kind of be able to celebrate that moment. So even those little goals like that can mean a lot of impact. I just saw this quote, which I thought was interesting from the Harvard Business Review. Why is it that some people can be extraordinarily well paid and work in pampered settings but feel empty, while others can work in the sewers of New York City and feel fulfilled? Part of that answer is purpose. So going back to my mission, goals, purpose, impact, those are the reasons that people feel engaged and don't feel like they're on that hamster wheel. Like why? Like at the Pacers, why are we posting 22 times a day on Twitter? Why? Right. Like what's the reason for this? Because we're trying to get to X. I don't think a lot of people know what that X is.
And explaining the why is also very important, especially when it comes to junior members of the team. Oftentimes they don't understand the larger purpose behind the business. Even explaining what is an EBITDA. Why does that matter? How does the revenue streams in the company work? Those are all things that are important. When I first came into my role here at Sirius XM in Pandora, I found out that they were being asked to do a lot of tasks, a lot of things. All of a sudden, a leader of another department comes back and says, hey, we need this report. And now this person has to stop everything they're doing to get the report done. And they're like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. Why is it important? And so they're half-assing putting together this report. Explain the why. And you will find that people are much more willing to give their time and their energy when they understand the business goal.
And even as a designer, if someone knows that my design made us sell 194 tickets today, like that's a big deal. That's an impactful thing that they did with their design. Obviously, we are all working in a very interesting world right now, tough world. So obviously Friday with the Friday news came out with the Roe v. Wade. This is some of that, myself and the HR team kind of came up with. But just as these numbers are happening, just like talking about the elephant in the room, kind of popping the balloon, like, guys, we understand it's tough today. Let's give our clients, let's give each other some grace as we all know that we're kind of going through it. And thank you for being strong. I think sometimes as leaders, our team feel like, oh, they don't get it. They don't know how tough it is. And like on that Friday, I'm like, let's go cameras off. Like, I get it. And just that relief of I don't have to show up at 110% today because of the stuff that's happening in the news maybe I've found that's been really helpful as well.
I also have taken it a little bit of a step further, and when sensitive subjects like this happen, I make it a mandate to postpone any non-urgent meetings.
Yeah.
Unless that meeting is important or crucial for that particular day, give your team the rest of the day. Let them allow themselves to be in the moment.
And then remember, we work in social media, so any therapist or any mindset coach would tell you in times like these, stay off social media. But when you're trying to tweet for your organization or whatever it may be, you're doom scrolling, right? Like everybody you follow are talking about this. So I understand it's really difficult mentally to show up to work when you work in that space. Number 5, communicate appreciation. So I don't want to pat myself on my back here, but this is something I dropped to one of our motion designers recently in Slack. Just wanted to send some gratitude your way. I'm so appreciative of how much pride you put into your work. Per usual, you've been killing it, et cetera, et cetera. And then his response below, this is free. And I think we don't use this enough. And my love language isn't necessarily words of affirmation. It's kind of lower on that list. So I've made it a system where every 2 months I have, again, that 2-hour block on my calendar, and I'll try to reach out to as many employees as I can because I know how much that means to people. And I get reports like, you don't know how much it meant reaching out to Sally and telling them how much you meant to them.
And don't forget the quiet people. It's often the quiet ones in the room who don't get that shout out, and they are the ones who often are burnt out and not feeling respected and valued. So just show up and say, hey, Jackie, I know you're quiet. I know you never turn your Zoom video on, but I see you. I see the great work you're doing. Keep it up.
Yeah. And then you spoke about just some of the things like, I guess, being from a budget perspective, trying to be creative on different things.
Absolutely. So we all are living in a budget constrained world. We all can't make the $1 million that we want to make in our roles, right? So we have to be creative with our budgets. Here's a few ways that I found to be creative. One, obviously, is give them an opportunity to be incentivized for the good work that they're doing. Gift cards, of course, we all know during the pandemic, especially if you know they're not taking their lunch, send them a DoorDash or Uber Eats gift card. Have them take their lunch. Maybe send them a sweet treat at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for a surprise, baked by Melissa, whatever you need to get that little sugar rush. Think about practical things. Gas is high. A gas gift card goes a long way. Or if that person is a parent, can you buy them some diapers or other tangible things that can really make a huge impact on just the temperature in the landscape?
And you said sometimes there'll be a morale budget potentially you can ask about and things like that.
Absolutely. I highly recommend, leaders checking with your HR departments or your finance team to see, is there a morale budget that exists that you can tap into for your team? Most of the time they won't tell you about it unless you don't ask.
And the 6th and final one is finding help outside of your department. So I'm going to let Tatiana talk about the first 3 buckets that she's used to find that elasticity within her roles, and I can obviously speak about the 4th one. But.
Stretch projects, big believer of it. If there are other teams or people on other teams who are looking to gain experience and you have a gap or a hole in your workload that you need to fill, work it out with that other team leader to create a formalized stretch project. Maybe they're helping out 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week. This will also create a pipeline that now if a new role opens up on the team, you've already kind of pre-trained some people internally. Secondly, consultants and freelancers. Oftentimes they are a different budget from your normal headcount. Tap those whenever possible. I actually just hired a consultant just to come in and set up all of my reporting dashboards. 1 month, I need you to crank these dashboards out just to get me started and then templatize it, and I can go from there. And of course, our lovely interns, let's not forget, we utilize those hours as much as possible.
Yeah, and then with our clients, we're on an annual retainer. When those story time, when like Tommy left us, right, we're actually asked to spike up quite a bit. Can you, run a platform for us? Or my boss wants to launch TikTok. I don't have the team to do so. Can you guys just own TikTok? We'll be the editor-in-chief, and you guys can do all the homework behind the scenes. So I always heard from our clients, cash is easier to unlock than headcount. Headcount's like a bad word in a lot of organizations. So just finding ways that you can get that elasticity is super important. One final thing that Tatiana and I are both really passionate about is obviously diversity, inclusion, equity. And one interesting thing about this story that we told is I think like when everybody's drowning and your back's against the wall, people start to make decisions like, well, I need a living body. Let's just like put
Yesterday.
aside, well, let's put aside kind of maybe our diversity goals, or let's put aside making sure that we have men and women, people of color in our final hiring pool. And I see even entrepreneurs like myself just making decisions because they need somebody yesterday. So when you get yourself in these situations, I think unfortunately people make tough decisions that don't really align with their values too.
And this is where, if you already have a pipeline, maybe it's stretch project or freelancers or consultants, you can easily bring those people right into the fold, but you've at least started that process early of having a diverse pipeline.
Yep. So just to recap, these are our 6 ways that you guys can help retain those superstar employees and try to prevent burnout and stay on top of it as leaders. And would love if we have some time to open up for any.
All right, there you have it. Man, 6 ways to retain your top talent, why people are burnt out. It's such a hot topic, especially in the sports industry, that doesn't get talked about enough. And I don't think leaders are preparing their leaders with the tools in order to combat this, especially in a virtual world, especially when we're now more on Zoom calls than in the office. It's so difficult to get some of that feedback and to put these different tools in your organization. I guarantee you it's going to really help the mental health. It's going to make your team feel like they're more supported. And most importantly, it's going to help you retain your top employees. If you lose your first employee within the first 12 months after hiring them, it costs you $50,000 on average to simply replace that person. When you talk about training and HR and liabilities and all those different things, that was a recent Google survey. They had determined that the average cost for a business is $50,000 if you lose that person in the first 12 months. So this is so important of a topic. I'm so glad you landed on this page. So glad that you checked out this entire YouTube. Make sure to comment below if you have any feedback for us. We really appreciate that. Subscribe on YouTube. We're bringing you value like this as often as possible. And subscribe to our podcast. We're talking to a bunch of CMOs, marketers, CEOs across the entire spectrum of Fortune 500, sports, entertainment. And I think we're the only show in town that's really getting into the granular details of how to get results on social and how to market effectively as a marketer. So check us out on that. My name is David Brickley. Thanks for checking us out on YouTube, and we'll see you guys soon.